Jonathan Reed, a legendary music producer, believed his life's melody ended when his beloved daughter vanished mysteriously in a tragic fire. But everything changed one night when Eva, a quiet young maid, secretly played a forbidden piano, awakening memories, secrets, and hope buried for decades. Who is Eva, and why does her music feel hauntingly familiar to Jonathan? Dive into this emotional journey of loss, mystery, redemption, and a powerful reunion that proves love transcends even the darkest silence. Where are you watching from? Comment below and subscribe to our channel now to uncover the heartfelt story that awaits. Jonathan Reed sat motionless in the shadowed study of his Florida mansion, his silver hair catching the soft amber glow from a Tiffany lamp beside him. Once, the estate had resonated with music so powerful it could captivate entire auditoriums, drawing crowds from every corner of the world. Now it lay shrouded in a persistent silence, an emptiness profound enough to feel tangible, wrapping around Jonathan's aging shoulders like a heavy cloak. Outside, the Atlantic Ocean whispered softly against the estate's stone foundation, rhythmic and relentless, mirroring the steady but somber beating of Jonathan's own heart. At 70, Jonathan was still strikingly handsome, though the sorrow etched into his features revealed a man weathered far beyond his years. He had been a titan in the music industry, an untouchable figure who shaped careers, dictated tastes, and produced melodies that had touched millions. Yet none of it mattered anymore. Not since Grace Reed, his fiery, fiercely independent daughter, had vanished 19 years prior, taking with her every last note of music that had ever truly mattered to him. Jonathan had meticulously preserved the west wing of the house, sealing it off like a sacred tomb. There, behind locked doors, stood Grace's grand Steinway piano, an instrument of gleaming ebony, now veiled beneath a faded velvet cover. Jonathan had forbidden anyone from entering the room, instructing his household staff to avoid the wing entirely. In his mind, it was a sanctuary and a graveyard, a space filled with memories so precious that he could not bear to disturb them. He himself had not stepped foot there for nearly 2 decades, afraid that even the faintest whisper of her music might reopen wounds he knew had never truly healed. The rest of the mansion had fallen into a perpetual twilight of disuse, filled only by echoes. Sometimes Jonathan imagined he heard Grace's laughter bubbling through the hallways, or her voice arguing passionately about freedom, art, and authenticity. In those moments, his heart would clench with a longing so intense that he had to steady himself against the nearest piece of furniture. He lived alone with his ghosts, replaying endless loops of memories, each sharper and more painful than the last. When the new maid, Eva Bennett, arrived, Jonathan hardly noticed her. Eva moved quietly through the sprawling house, careful never to disturb the fragile balance of its silence. She was young, barely 20, reserved, graceful, and dark-haired, with eyes that held an old soul's depth and sadness. She had come through a domestic agency after the previous maid resigned abruptly, without notice or reason. Jonathan hadn't bothered to interview Eva personally. Her resume indicated reliability, and he required nothing beyond basic efficiency. Yet, Eva soon found herself inexplicably drawn toward the West Wing. Each evening after finishing her duties, she lingered by the sealed corridor, her heartbeat quickening as though responding to a hidden calling. Despite clear warnings to avoid the forbidden area, Eva felt an irresistible pull, a strange ache within her chest each time she passed the locked room. It felt familiar, though she had never seen inside it. A sensation of loss intertwined mysteriously with longing. One late evening, unable to quell her curiosity any longer, Eva stood at the end of the dimly lit corridor, staring at the ancient brass lock guarding the music room. With trembling fingers, she brushed the tarnished doorknob, feeling its cold resistance against her skin. A strange impulse surged through her veins, something primal and impossible to ignore. It wasn't mere curiosity, it was necessity, as if a piece of her very being lay hidden just beyond that door, waiting desperately to be discovered. Inside his study, unaware of the maid's quiet intrusion, Jonathan stared out at the distant horizon, lost in thoughts of his daughter, Grace. He believed nothing could ever bring music back into his life, resigned to a silence so deep that it had become a part of him. But even as he sat in quiet resignation, the air in the mansion subtly shifted, charged with anticipation. For somewhere deep within the forbidden room, music was about to awaken once more, and with it, the possibility of a truth Jonathan never dared imagine. Eva's curiosity quickly became an obsession, fueled by dreams that had haunted her since childhood. They came in fragmented melodies, faint but undeniably clear, always accompanied by the hazy image of piano keys shimmering beneath pale fingers. She had never played professionally nor received formal training, yet her instinctive grasp of music was uncanny, something deep within her soul, guiding each hesitant note. At the orphanage, she would sneak into the old chapel at night, carefully lifting the lid of a battered piano to piece together the haunting songs that whispered through her dreams. Each note felt like a memory from a past life, woven through her very bones. Now, standing before the forbidden room of Jonathan Reed's vast estate, Eva felt the same inexplicable connection. She returned later that night when the house had grown silent and dark, slipping quietly through corridors bathed in moonlight, her heart racing faster with every step toward the west wing. Her fingertips traced the rough edges of the brass lock once more, its ancient mechanism a puzzle waiting patiently for her to solve. Drawing a long breath, Eva gently removed a slender pin from her hair, an old skill born of necessity from a childhood of locked doors, and carefully inserted it into the keyhole. The lock clicked softly, giving way beneath her practiced touch. The door swung open noiselessly, revealing a room untouched by time. Moonlight seeped through tall, dusty curtains, illuminating motes of dust floating softly through the still air. At the center stood the grand Steinway, majestic in its silent dignity, draped in heavy velvet. Eva approached cautiously, reverently, her chest tight with anticipation. She lifted the velvet covering and her breath caught in awe. Polished ebony gleamed beneath her fingertips, its surface cool and smooth as polished glass. She pressed a single ivory key gently. The note, clear and resonant, hung in the air as though hesitant to fade. With trembling legs, Eva lowered herself onto the bench, feeling as though she had finally found her way home after an eternity lost. Her hands settled naturally onto the keys, and suddenly, music poured forth effortlessly, flowing from her fingertips in waves she could not control nor understand. The melody rose and fell, twisting and unfolding in the soft darkness. A composition Eva had never heard before yet knew intimately, as though it had been inscribed upon her heart at birth. As she played, a quiet ache settled in her chest, a bittersweet blend of sorrow and joy that resonated through her body, driving tears to her eyes. Unbeknownst to Eva, the notes reached Jonathan Reed in his private quarters. He was pacing restlessly, a habit that had plagued him for decades. When the first notes drifted toward him, Jonathan froze, rooted to the spot. A chill raced down his spine. Impossible, he thought, heart pounding painfully against his ribs. He moved toward the sound, his breath shallow, his steps uncertain as he navigated through hallways long forgotten, each note beckoning him forward like a ghostly siren. As he neared the closed door, his body stiffened, hands shaking uncontrollably as he reached toward the brass doorknob. He hesitated, frozen with fear, uncertainty, and an almost desperate hope. The melody drifting from within was achingly familiar, a secret composition that had never been shared outside the walls of his family. Only Grace and he had known its haunting beauty, and hearing it now felt like a cruel, impossible miracle. Jonathan's pulse thundered in his ears as he placed his palm against the door's wooden surface, barely daring to breathe. Inside the room, Eva's fingers slowed as the music reached its poignant climax. A profound stillness settled over the space, and she opened her eyes, realizing suddenly she had been crying. A sense of deep familiarity enveloped her, as though the room itself recognized her presence, embracing her gently as its own. Carefully replacing the velvet covering over the piano keys, she stood shakily, overcome by the powerful emotions the music had evoked. As Eva slipped back through the shadows toward her small quarters, she was unaware that Jonathan Reed still lingered just outside the door, his heart racing wildly, eyes wide with disbelief, questioning everything he had believed about the past. Jonathan's mind refused to quiet. He paced restlessly through the vast corridors of his estate, sleep now a distant memory, replaced instead by relentless questions that gnawed at the edges of his consciousness. Each night the mysterious melody returned, haunting him with its familiarity, leaving him shaken, yet strangely captivated. Eventually, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, Jonathan reached out to a man he had hoped never to contact again. Oliver Pierce, the private investigator who had scoured the earth nearly 20 years ago in search of his lost daughter. Oliver arrived the following morning, his once black hair now peppered with silver, his gaze as sharp and penetrating as ever. The two men exchanged brief pleasantries in Jonathan's study, their polite words concealing layers of complicated history. Jonathan wasted no time, quickly detailing the inexplicable presence of the secret melody and the curious young maid whose fingers had given it new life. Oliver listened intently, nodding slightly at intervals, his expression shifting subtly from skepticism to quiet intrigue. Within hours, Oliver began meticulously retracing Eva's past, digging through faded records and forgotten paperwork. He uncovered pieces of a puzzle long buried beneath layers of bureaucratic negligence and secrecy. Eva Bennett, it turned out, had been left anonymously at a New York hospital precisely 9 months after Grace Reed's sudden disappearance. Grace had been seen at the same hospital, though records were incomplete, and nurses from that time barely recalled details. Oliver, relentless and methodical, pieced together a trail of breadcrumbs leading inexorably toward an unsettling conclusion, one Jonathan had never allowed himself to consider. That night, Jonathan summoned Eva to his study, heart pounding with a mixture of anxiety and expectation. She entered cautiously, her eyes wary but curious, hands clasped nervously before her. Jonathan studied her carefully for the first time, noticing the subtle angles of her face, the quiet intensity of her gaze, features hauntingly reminiscent of Grace. "Eva," Jonathan began, his voice gentle but firm, masking the turmoil within. "The music you've been playing, where did you learn it?" Eva hesitated, her breath quickening. "I didn't learn it, Mr. Reed. It's always been inside me. I've heard it in dreams since I was a child. I've never known its source. It just exists within me." Jonathan drew a long, unsteady breath, his mind reeling from the implications. "Eva, there's something you need to see." He placed on his desk a photograph of Grace, a candid shot taken just weeks before she vanished. Eva picked it up slowly, her fingers trembling as she traced the face in the image. She looks so much like me," Eva whispered, her voice barely audible, her eyes wide with shock. Jonathan nodded solemnly. "Grace was my daughter. She vanished 19 years ago in a terrible fire. I was told she perished. But the music you've played, Eva, no one but Grace and I ever knew that song." "No one." Eva sank slowly into a chair, the photograph still cradled gently between her fingers. Tears welled in her eyes as she tried to process the staggering revelation. Her heart ached with confusion, hope, and an overwhelming longing she had never fully understood. Could she somehow still be alive? Jonathan swallowed hard, feeling a sudden pang of guilt over years lost to stubborn grief. "I don't know, but Oliver Pierce, the investigator who found you, thinks there's more to the story. Your connection to Grace is undeniable. Eva, I believe you are her daughter, my granddaughter." Eva's shoulders shook softly as the tears spilled over, releasing years of unanswered questions and aching solitude. Jonathan watched helplessly, torn between regret for past mistakes and desperate hope for redemption. "I promise," Jonathan said quietly, voice filled with determination, "we'll uncover the truth, whatever it takes. You deserve to know who you are, and I owe it to Grace, to both of you." Eva looked up, eyes shimmering with tears, but also a faint glimmer of cautious hope. In that quiet moment, the walls of misunderstanding and silence that had surrounded them began to crumble, giving way to something new and fragile. An unexpected bond formed through shared pain and the haunting melody that now bound their fates together. Determined to uncover the full truth, Jonathan and Eva accompanied Oliver Pierce on a journey that would forever alter their lives. The private investigator's meticulous research had pointed them toward a secluded facility in the sun-bleached deserts of Arizona, a place hidden from prying eyes, concealed by layers of secrecy and silence. As their small chartered plane soared westward, the trio sat mostly in silence, each absorbed in private thoughts. Eva gazed anxiously at the rugged landscape below, her pulse quickening with every mile they drew closer to the possibility of answers she had spent her entire life seeking. Jonathan's eyes remained fixed ahead, burdened by hope and dread in equal measure. Upon landing, The relentless Arizona heat enveloped them immediately, the sun glaring fiercely overhead, as Oliver guided them through winding roads that cut across the barren terrain. They arrived at a modest, unassuming building nestled amidst the sparse vegetation, its whitewashed walls reflecting the scorching rays of midday. As they approached, Jonathan felt a tightening in his chest, a mixture of apprehension and longing so intense it was nearly suffocating. Eva walked close beside him, her presence offering a quiet, steady reassurance. Inside, the facility was eerily calm, its air tinged with antiseptic and the subtle scent of lavender. A receptionist greeted them hesitantly, her expression cautious as Oliver mentioned the name they had discovered through painstaking investigation, Eleanor West. The receptionist's eyes narrowed slightly, betraying recognition and a guarded reluctance to proceed further. Oliver pressed gently but firmly, presenting carefully prepared legal documents that demanded cooperation. After a tense exchange of hushed words, they were finally escorted down a silent corridor, footsteps echoing softly against polished tile floors. The room they entered was sparse but comfortable, illuminated softly by sunlight filtering through half-closed blinds. In the corner stood an old, upright piano, its wood worn smooth by countless hours of gentle fingers tracing familiar keys. Sitting before it, her back turned to them, was a woman with long, dark hair touched by streaks of silver. Her slender shoulders rose and fell gently with each breath, as her fingers drifted tenderly across the ivory keys, conjuring the same haunting melody that had drawn Eva and Jonathan inexorably to this moment. Jonathan froze, breathless, unable to speak. Eva, guided by a force beyond understanding, moved cautiously toward the woman. The pianist paused, as though sensing a presence behind her. Slowly, almost fearfully, she turned to face Eva, revealing eyes filled with years of quiet pain and confusion, eyes that mirrored Eva's own. Eva's breath caught sharply. Tears filled her eyes instantly, spilling softly down her cheeks as she stared into the face of Grace Reed, her mother, whom she had long believed lost to time and tragedy. Grace's expression was distant at first, clouded by decades of trauma and isolation, yet as she studied Eva, a flicker of recognition stirred. Her lips parted, trembling slightly, as a single word escaped her throat in a hushed whisper. "Sarah?" Eva gasped softly, stepping closer. "Sarah was a name they gave me once, in a foster home," she said gently, her voice breaking with emotion. "I've dreamed of you, of this moment, for as long as I can remember." Grace reached out, her hand shaking as she softly brushed Eva's tear-streaked cheek, eyes widening with newfound clarity. "My daughter," she whispered, the fragile acknowledgement shattering years of painful uncertainty. Eva fell gently into her mother's embrace, their bodies trembling as they held each other tightly, as if afraid the dream might dissolve into illusion. Jonathan remained rooted in place, witnessing the reunion through eyes blurred by tears he could not contain. The weight of nearly 2 decades lifted suddenly from his heart, replaced by overwhelming gratitude and bittersweet relief. Approaching slowly, he knelt beside them, placing a gentle hand on Grace's shoulder. She turned to him slowly, recognition dawning gradually, heartbreak and forgiveness flickering together in her weary gaze. "Father," she whispered softly, a lifetime of hurt and healing contained within that single word. Jonathan nodded, speechless, embracing both Grace and Eva in a single trembling gesture. In that quiet, sunlit room in Arizona, amidst tears and silence, the fractured pieces of their lives finally began to knit together, the melody that had haunted them now becoming a song of hope, connection, and undeniable love. In the gentle weeks following their return home, a quiet transformation began to settle upon Jonathan Reed's Grand Florida estate. Where once silence had reigned supreme, music now breathed life into the rooms, softly at first, then steadily growing stronger. Jonathan watched with gratitude and quiet awe as Grace and Eva discovered each other anew through shared melodies and gentle laughter, slowly bridging the vast gulf of years lost to tragedy. Grace's recovery was not instantaneous. Her healing unfolded delicately, like the tender petals of a long-dormant flower finally reaching toward the sun. Her memory, still fragile, returned in fragments. A song, a scent, or a simple touch from Eva could unlock doors long shut within her heart. The estate, previously a place of haunting memories and frozen grief, now vibrated with warmth and newfound purpose. Jonathan spent hours in the West Wing, doors thrown open wide, allowing sunlight and fresh sea breezes to fill spaces that had once felt lifeless and stale. He found joy in listening as Eva practiced diligently, her innate musical talent now honed through formal training and Grace's gentle guidance. With each passing day, Jonathan felt his own heart softening, releasing burdens he had carried for far too long. Inspired by the reunion and the resilient love between his daughter and granddaughter, Jonathan composed again for the first time in decades. Notes flowed effortlessly onto staff paper, driven by emotions deeper and purer than any he had ever known. The piece he created, aptly titled Echoes of the Heart, wove together strands of sorrow, redemption, and the unbreakable bonds of family. It was a testament to the transformative power of love and music, the very forces that had guided their paths back together after nearly 2 decades apart. Determined to share this powerful composition, Jonathan arranged an intimate recital at the estate. Invitations were carefully selected and sparingly sent. Close friends, trusted confidants, and those who had witnessed their family's journey firsthand. Oliver Pierce attended, as did staff who had loyally supported Jonathan through years of solitude. The large drawing room was gently lit by candles, casting golden hues across polished wooden floors and shimmering keys of the newly restored Steinway piano. Jonathan stood silently at the doorway, watching as Grace and Eva seated themselves side by side at the instrument, poised gracefully to share the music that now represented their journey home. With quiet reverence, Jonathan took his place beside them, his aged hands resting firmly upon the keys. The room hushed instantly, an expectant silence filling every heart present. Then, gently and beautifully, the music began to flow, an intertwining harmony of 3 souls who'd weathered unimaginable storms and found their way back to one another. The melody surged and ebbed like waves upon the shore outside, whispering stories of loss and courage, grief and joy, separation and reunion. As they played, tears glistened in the eyes of those watching, moved deeply by the raw honesty and profound beauty of the shared performance. When the final notes faded softly into the stillness, no one spoke. The silence was sacred, filled with reverent awe and quiet gratitude. Jonathan rose slowly, his heart full to overflowing, and took Grace and Eva's hands gently into his own. Facing their small audience, his voice trembled only slightly as he spoke clearly, firmly. Tonight, we celebrate not only the music that brought us back together, but the courage it took to face the past. My family stands before you now, whole, resilient, and finally at peace. Applause erupted, warm and heartfelt, filling the room with a joyful sound more beautiful than Jonathan had ever imagined possible. Afterward, the guests departed quietly, leaving the family alone beneath the comforting silence of the starlit sky. Jonathan watched Grace and Eva stroll arm in arm toward the veranda, overlooking the gentle ocean waves, their silhouettes illuminated softly by moonlight. Standing there beneath the vast expanse of stars, Jonathan felt his heart at peace for the first time in decades. He knew that life's storms were inevitable, pain unavoidable, but he also understood, deeply and truly, that love had the power to rebuild, reconnect, and heal even the deepest wounds. As he joined Grace and Eva, feeling their hands warmly clasp his own, Jonathan finally allowed himself to smile, certain that the melody they had created together would carry them forward, forever united by the music of their hearts. The powerful story we've just shared teaches us a timeless and deeply resonant truth: that love, family, and connection possess an extraordinary power to heal even the deepest wounds. Jonathan, Grace, and Eva remind us that no matter how profound our losses or how overwhelming our regrets, redemption and forgiveness are always within reach if we have the courage to face the truth. Often, we become prisoners of our own silence, held captive by grief and isolation. Yet as this family's incredible journey reveals, when we open our hearts and confront our past openly, we discover pathways to hope, renewal, and peace. Their story also illustrates how music can transcend barriers, reaching places words alone cannot. Music binds generations together, bridging gaps that once seemed impossible to cross. Eva's innate talent and Grace's profound musical gift symbolize a legacy far greater than mere notes on a page. They represent love passed down through generations, an invisible bond connecting hearts across time. Jonathan's courage to finally let go of his past, to open his heart and home to the possibility of reunion, teaches us that it is never too late to rebuild what seems irreparably broken. Above all, this tale encourages each of us to embrace the people around us with openness and compassion, reminding us to cherish the precious connections that define our lives. Because ultimately, it is our relationships with one another, rooted in understanding, forgiveness, and love, that compose the most beautiful and meaningful symphony we can ever create. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt stories that inspire and uplift. See you next time.